Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. One subject that is often discussed in connection with Bhagavan's teachings is Ekajivavada. It's a topic that has come up for discussion quite often recently, but it's a topic that always comes up for discussion because it is a very deep and subtle teaching, and it's very easy to raise objections to it if we don't understand it in the broader context of Advaita in general and Bhagavan's teachings in particular. So a friend recently pointed out to me several recent comments that are objecting to this teaching of Bhagavan and asked me to address these. So I apologize for taking up this topic again, because it is an important topic. It's a very central part of Bhagavan's teachings, but it needs to be understood in proportion, in a proper context. That is the basic contention of Advaita, is what is expressed in the Chandogya Upanishad, ekam eva advaitiyam. That means one only without a second. What is said in the Chandogya Upanishad was, in the beginning, there was one only without a second. And that one only is sateva, existence only. So only existence existed. Or in the next verse, it says sattva eva. Sattva means, sat means being, sattva means beingness. It amounts to the same thing. So existence alone is what actually exists in the beginning. The interpretation, there are many different interpretations of Vedanta. So according to many interpretations of Vedanta, that one became many. So there was an actual process of transformation, where the one thing that actually exists became all this multiplicity. That is known as Parinamavada, the contention that there has been transformation. But according to Advaita, not only in the beginning, but always, there is one only without a second. Because another important principle of Vedanta is that it's what is expressed by Sri Krishna in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in verse 16 of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, there is no existence of what does not exist. And there's no non-existence of what does exist. What that implies is, but what exists, well, Bhagavan often used to express it in this way, this is the implication, but what exists must always exist. Something that exists at one time and not at another time doesn't actually exist, even when it seems to exist. So since in the beginning there was one only without a second, even now there is one only without a second. Nothing else has actually come into existence. So how to account for all this multiplicity? As I say, most systems of Vedanta account for the appearance of multiplicity by saying that the one, namely Brahman, has become all of this. But Advaita sticks to the principle that there's one only without a second. Even now there's one only without a second. So all this appearance of multiplicity is an unreal appearance. It's a mere appearance. It's not actually real. This is what is called Vivartavada. And there are many different levels of explanation within Advaita, but the one thing all Advaitins agree on, all true Advaitins agree on, is that the appearance of multiplicity is just an appearance. Vivarta means an appearance, an unreal appearance, an illusory appearance. So it's not, though there seem to be many, it is actually only the one that seems to be many. Bhagavan goes one step further than this. That is, Bhagavan always, Bhagavan's teachings are extremely practical. So Bhagavan is always drawing out the practical implication of the teachings of Advaita. So what Bhagavan points out is in order to have an appearance, there must be something to whom it appears. You cannot have an appearance without it appearing to something. So the very idea that there is an appearance presupposes something to which that appearance appears. So if all multiplicity is just an appearance, there must be something to which it appears. Many people with a superficial understanding of Advaita think all this appears to the one, Brahman. But that cannot be the case, because Brahman is one only without a second. Brahman always knows itself as one only without a second. So Brahman cannot know itself as an appearance of multiplicity. So Brahman as it is always one only without a second, and always knows itself as one only without a second. So to whom does all this appearance appear? As Bhagavan clarifies, it appears only to ego. So what is this ego, and what is the relationship between ego and Brahman? Brahman is the pure awareness, the pure satchit, the pure existence awareness that is one only without a second. Ego cannot be something other than that, because that alone is what exists. But ego is that step back, one step back. That one only without a second always knows its own existence. So it always knows itself as I am. I am means I exist. So Brahman always knows itself as I am. And that is why it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. That is what shines as I am. The pure I am is Brahman. Ego is that same I am mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So as Bhagavan often said, I am is the truth. I am this or that is untrue. That is, I am is our existence. I am this or that is an identity, and it's a false identity, because what we actually are, we cannot be anything other than what we actually are. So our true identity is what Bhagavan expressed as aham aham, or nan nan, I am I. In other words, I am nothing other than I. So, but as ego, we always experience ourselves as I am this body. So ego is not other than pure awareness, but it seems to be other than pure awareness, because ego, instead of experiencing itself as just I am, as ego, we always experience ourselves as I am this body. So it is only in the view of ego that all this multiplicity exists, or seems to exist, rather. We can see this from our own experience. In waking and dream, we experience ourselves as a body. And consequently, we experience the appearance of all this multiplicity. That is, this body is one object in this world, which consists of so many objects. You cannot have a body without a world. And you cannot, so we only experience a world when we experience ourselves as a body. This is true both in waking and in dream. In sleep, we do not experience ourselves as I am this body, and consequently, we do not experience anything other than ourselves. That is, sleep is truly an experience of one only without a second. So it's only as ego that we experience this world. Bhagavan expresses this very clearly in verse 4 of Uludunapadu. This is the verse where he really begins to get down to the nitty-gritty of his teachings. What he says in verse 4 is a very, very important principle. He says, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms, and how? Can what is seen be otherwise be of a different nature to the eye that sees it? He puts it more in a more compact way than that, but that is the implication. That is what he implies there is, but only when we experience ourselves as a form do we experience other forms. Forms here means not only physical forms. Any phenomenon is a form. Anything that is in any way distinguishable from any other thing is a form. So when he says if oneself is a form, what he means is if we experience ourselves as a body, we will experience the world and God likewise. We will experience them as forms. When we do not experience ourselves as a body, who is there to see any forms and how? Because the nature of what is seen will always be the same as the nature of what sees it. He uses the term I there, EYE, that is. He uses I there in a metaphorical sense to mean the knower. So if the knower knows itself as a form, as the ego does, it will know only forms. If the knower knows itself as formless, then it will know only formlessness. So he concludes that verse 4 by saying, oneself is the I, the infinite I. What he implies here is, when he says oneself is the I, he means ourself as we actually are is the real I, the infinite I. The term he uses for infinite I is antamilakan. Antam is a Sanskrit word that means end or limit. So what is without end or limit means it's infinite. So the infinite I. All forms are finite. That which is infinite must be formless, because it's not the infinite. There's nothing other than the infinite. So it's not possible to distinguish the infinite from any other thing. So what we actually are is the infinite I. That implies our real nature is infinite awareness. Infinite awareness cannot know anything other than infinitude. It cannot know anything finite. It's only in the view of an awareness that sees itself as finite, sees itself as a form, but forms appear. So Bhagavan's, this is a very important clarification Bhagavan has made, because many people who studied Advaita, the classical Advaita texts and the commentaries on them and everything, they are surprised to be told, but that which sees all this is only ego, not Brahman. They say, no, 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 it's the witness consciousness. Yes, it's the witness consciousness. But Sakshi Te Chaitanya is the Sanskrit word for witness consciousness. As Bhagavan pointed out, the term Sakshi is used in two senses in the classical text. Sakshi means witness. Sakshi is used in some context to mean the witness in the sense of the knower of all this. In that sense, Sakshi is ego, because it's ego that knows all this. But Sakshi is also used in a deeper sense, as Bhagavan pointed out. In the deeper sense, Sakshi means sanadhi. Sakshi means presence. So when it is said, for example, that Brahman is Jiva Sakshi, the witness of the Jiva, or Sarva Sakshi, the witness of all, it doesn't mean that Brahman is knowing the Jiva or Brahman is knowing all. It means that it's the presence of Brahman that gives a semi-existence to all these things. But all these things seem to exist only in the view of ego. So in the view of Brahman as Brahman, there is one only without a second. In the view of Brahman as ego, all this multiplicity appears. So it's only in the view of ego that all this multiplicity appears. So coming back to the basics, there's one only without a second. All multiplicity is just an appearance. But for there to be an appearance, there must be one to whom it appears. So long as we experience this appearance of multiplicity, we see the appearance of many jivas. That is, because jiva means, in this context, means ego. Because we as ego experience ourselves as a body, as a person, it seems to us that every person we see is an ego just like us. So the multiplicity of jivas is as much a part of the appearance as the multiplicity of objects. That is the multiplicity of jivas. Jivas means sentient beings, beings who experience things. They are as real as all the objects we see. That is, it is often said the universe consists of Chaitana and Achaitana. Chaitana means consciousness, that is sentient beings in this context. Achaitana means insentient beings or objects. So the multiplicity of jivas is as real as the multiplicity of other objects, as real as tables and chairs and lights and walls and houses and cars and mountains and oceans and all these objects. As real as all of these, there is a multiplicity of jivas. Bhagavan doesn't deny that, but that is all part of the appearance. So at the level of what is called Vivaharika Satya, Vivaharika Satya means transactional reality. At the level of Vivaharika Satya, yes, there are many jivas, many sentient beings, not only human sentient beings, but so many other sentient beings, cows and elephants and cats and dogs and giraffes and fish and all manner of birds and all manner of creatures. They appear to be just as sentient as we appear to be. That is not the ultimate truth, but at the level of Vivaharika Satya, that is true. In Advaita, it is often said, it is often spoken of as if there are three levels of reality. Actually, reality is one. The ultimate reality, the Paramartika Satya, is what is called Ajata. According to Ajata, there is always one only without a second. Nothing else has ever come into existence. Nothing else has even appeared to exist. So there's a very famous verse by Gaudapada in the Mandukya Karikas, whether this verse is originally a verse by Gaudapada or not is not entirely clear, because it also appears in several of the minor Upanishads. So it's quite possibly a verse that he was quoting from an Upanishad. But the verse is, I can't remember the exact verse in Sanskrit. It begins na nirodo na chotpati. That means there is no destruction. There is no coming, and there's no coming into existence. That is, why is there no destruction? Only those things that come into existence can be destroyed. Since nothing has ever actually come into existence, nothing is ever actually destroyed. So when he says na cha utpati, cha means and, na means not, utpati means rising. So there's no rising. That means nothing has ever come into existence. Nothing has ever even appeared to it, seemingly come into existence. There's no arising at all. I mean, he goes on to say there's no bondage, there's no one seeking liberation, and there's no one liberated. This is Paramartika Satya. This is the ultimate truth. So this is the ultimate truth of Advaita. Bhagavan has confirmed this. But what Bhagavan made clear is Ajata is not a teaching. Because in Ajata, there is only one only without a second. Nothing has ever come into existence, therefore nothing needs to be destroyed. There's no bondage, there's no liberation. So in Ajata, there's neither is there anyone to be taught, nor is there anyone to teach, nor is there any need for any teaching. So Ajata is not a teaching, it is the ultimate truth. A teaching is only necessary because we experience the appearance of multiplicity. That's why Bhagavan begins the main text of Uludunapadu with the words, Nam Ulahum Kandalal, because we see the world. If we didn't see the world, then there'd be no problem. Because we see the world, that is the problem. And why do we see the world? As he makes clear in verse 4, because we take ourselves to be a form, we see the world as forms. So the problem is only for ego. And ego is itself, as Bhagavan makes clear in verse 24 of Uludunapadu, ego is not only jiva, it is also bondage. It is samsara. There's no bondage or samsara other than ego. So the whole problem is ego. In the view of ego, ajata does not seem to be the case. That is, as ego, we seem to have appeared as ego, and we see the appearance of all of this. So our experience as ego seems to contradict the truth of Ajata. But nevertheless, Ajata is the ultimate truth, because all of this is just an appearance. So in many that is, within Advaita, very different levels of explanation are given to suit people of different levels of understanding. So one very typical explanation in Advaita is that there are three levels of reality or unreality. There's Paramatika Satya, that's the only real reality, the only actual reality. But in the level of unreality, there are two levels. There's Vivaharika Satya and Pratibhasika Satya. It is often said that the waking state is Vivaharika Satya. That is, it's transactional reality. And dream is Pratibhasika Satya. Dream is just seeming reality. That is because in many, for people who are unwilling to accept the deeper implications of Advaita, it is acknowledged that there's a seeming difference between waking and dream. However, Bhagavan, because Bhagavan's teachings are very practical, Bhagavan doesn't dilute things in this way. Bhagavan makes it very clear, but what we call the waking state is just another dream. There is no difference between waking and dream. That means that Vivaharika Satya is actually Pratibhasika Satya. That is, transactional reality is actually just seeming reality. It's not real, even though it seems to be real. And as Bhagavan pointed out, everything that when we are dreaming seems to be a continuity of our waking state. So the Vivaharika Satya seems to be the case even in dream. Just as Vivaharika Satya seems to be the case in waking, it seems to be the case in dream. But in both states, actually, this Vivaharika Satya is actually just Pratibhasika Satya. That means this transactional so-called reality is just a seeming reality. It's not real. So how is this relevant to this question of Ekajiva Vada? About Ekajiva Vada means the contention that there's just one jiva. If, as one of the central contentions of deeper forms of Advaita, for example, Gaudapada in Mandukya Karika, he argues very strongly that there is no difference between waking and dream, as does Bhagavan. So from that perspective, of that deeper explanation of Advaita, Vivaharika Satya is just Pratibhasika Satya. The transactional reality is just seeming reality. So, so long as we're looking outwards, we seem to be in a world of Vivaharika Satya. We are interacting with the world. We are transacting with this world. And at this level, there seem to be a multiplicity of jivas. So long as we are looking outwards and behaving in this world, it seems to us that there are a multiplicity of other sentient beings, and we act accordingly. But if we think more deeply about this multiplicity of jivas is a part of the multiplicity of all these phenomena. And according to Advaita, all this multiplicity is just an appearance. And it appears only, as Bhagavan made clear, it appears only in the view of ourself as ego. So though there seem to be a multiplicity of jivas, and though when we're interacting with the world, we must interact with the world as if there are a multiplicity of jivas, when we are inquiring more deeply, we must recognize all this multiplicity exists in whose view? In my view. Then who am I? We need to turn our attention back within. So it is Bhagavan taught Ekajiva Vada not in order to for us to try to behave in the world as if there's only one jiva. So long as we're behaving in the world, there seems to be a multiplicity of jivas, we behave accordingly. Because our behavior, who is it who is behaving in the world? It's the person we seem to be. This person is as much a part of the appearance as all the other many jivas. So at that Vivaharika level, we behave as if there are many jivas, and that is appropriate. But if we want to know, to investigate and find out the reality of this appearance, since it all appears to whom? To me, then who am I? We need to investigate ourselves, the one to whom all this multiplicity appears. We cannot know the truth of this multiplicity, the underlying reality of this multiplicity, without knowing the reality of ourselves. That is, without knowing the knower, without knowing the reality of the knower, we cannot know the reality of the known. So this world, all this multiplicity, is something known by us. So who are we who know it? We need to investigate ourselves. This is why there's a verse in Gurvachaka Kavai in which Bhagavan says, this is verse 534 of Gurvachaka Kavai. He says, accepting that Jiva is only one, may the courageous one who has discernment or comprehension or wisdom subside or penetrate in the heart, implying by investigating who am I, this one jiva. Those words are not there. The actual words that are there are, accepting that jiva is only one, may the courageous one who has discernment subside in the heart. The implication is, how do we subside in the heart? By turning our attention back within. And then he goes on to say, only to suit the mind of dull-witted people in whom such discernment has not yet blossomed, to sages and sacred texts speak as if conceding, but jivas are many. So what Bhagavan says here, that is what we need to understand from what Bhagavan says here is, the reason he teaches Ekajiva Vada is not for us to engage in arguments or to raise questions about the appearance. It is to investigate who are we, the one to whom all this multiplicity appears. So the correct application of Ekajiva Vada as taught by Bhagavan is to turn our attention within and to investigate what we are. Who am I, this one jiva who sees all this multiplicity of jivas? But so long as we're looking outwards, we need to behave in this world appropriately. So we need to behave as if there are many jivas, because that's how it appears to be. Just like all this may be a dream, but even if we believe it's a dream, we don't for that reason walk off the edge of a tall building, because we know in this dream there is a law of gravity. If we step off a tall building, we're going to have a nasty fall at the bottom. So we behave in this world according to the seeming laws, the laws that seem to govern this world. So as real as the power of gravity is the multiplicity of jivas. That is, it's all an appearance. None of it is actually real. But so long as we experience ourselves as a body, we experience ourselves as one among many jivas in this universe. So the multiplicity of jivas is true at the Vivaharika level. But if we want to investigate more deeply, we need to understand that all this so-called Vivaharika Satya, this transactional reality, is actually just Pratibhasika Satya. It's all just an appearance. So if we understand it's all just an appearance, then we should investigate who am I, the one to whom all this appears. So long as we're interacting with the world, we need to interact with the world as it appears to be. We can't go against the seeming laws that seem to govern this world. So as real as all the physical laws that govern this world are the fact that there is not only a multiplicity of insentient beings, there are all insentient objects, there are also a multiplicity of seemingly sentient objects. So when people raise objections about Ekajiva Vada, their objections are all in relation to the appearance. They say, then who is the one jiva? If I'm the one jiva, that means you're all insentient. Yes, that is ultimately the truth, but that's not the correct application of it. So long as we see a multiplicity of people, every person, and person here means not just human person, every sentient being seems to us to be a jiva, and we have to treat them accordingly. That's why it's very important that we should be kind, caring. We shouldn't cause harm. We need to follow the ethical principle of ahimsa, not causing harm to any living being. If someone comes to us in distress, we don't just dismiss, oh, you're my mental projection, I'm not concerned about your distress. No, for us, that person and their distress seems to be very real. So we listen to them, we give a patient hearing to them, we say what we can to console that person. So long as we are interacting in this world, we have to interact as if there are a multiplicity of jivas. That we need to be very, very clear about. But that doesn't mean that is the ultimate truth. If we want to know the ultimate truth, we need to investigate ourselves, the one to whom this multiplicity of jivas appear. And we shouldn't take this one jiva that we take to be, even this one jiva we take ourselves to be, who is aware of all these other jivas, even this one jiva is itself unreal. If we investigate ourselves, as Bhagavan makes clear, it will be clear that there's no such thing as ego or mind or jiva at all. So we need to understand all these things in proportion. There is a verse in Uludunapdu Anubandham, verse 39 of Uludunapdu Anubandham, in which Bhagavan, the whole verse is an important verse, but relevant to our present discussion, the first two lines of the verse are what are most important. That is, what Bhagavan says in this verse is, advaitam endrum ahatu uraha. That means, may you always cherish or experience advaita in the heart. Or podum, advaitam, segale, atrahaga. That means, or podum means even once, at any time, do not, we should not put advaita in action. Why should we not put advaita in action? If we think about it, it should be obvious to us. In the state of advaita, there's one only without a second. So who is to do what? That is, action implies time. There has to be, you can't do an action if there's no time. Time is something second. Time is something that appears in waking and dream, it disappears in sleep. So time is not real. So all action is true only at the Vivahārika level. So only at the level of action, and in Vivahārika, there seems to be there's the appearance of multiplicity. So it's impossible to put Advaita in action. If we imagine we are putting Advaita in action, we haven't understood what is Advaita. If we understand what is Advaita, there's no possibility of putting it in action. So in the level of action, we should act as if all this multiplicity is real. That's the only practical way of living. Just like as I said, we don't walk off the top of a tall building. We don't walk out in the road in front of a fast approaching car or bus or something. We know we abide by the rules of the appearance. If this may all be a dream, but we have to act in the dream in an appropriate manner. As Bhagavan often used to say, in a dream, the dream food satisfies dream hunger. Both the hunger and the food, both are unreal, but in the dream they seem to be real. The hunger seems to be real, and the food that quenches your hunger seems to be real. So at that level, at the level of Vivahārika, we have to act as if there are a multiplicity of jivas. We need to treat all other seeming jivas with all due care and concern and respect. So there's actually no contradiction between Ekajivavada and behaving appropriately in the world. The questions, some of the comments I was asked to address I will just read some extracts from them and reply to them in the context of what I've said. The first one was, someone asked, who is it? This is a comment made on one of the videos where I was talking about this Ekajivavada. Who is he trying to convince? Why bother trying to convince minds that only seem to exist? His behavior, i.e., appearing here and giving talks to us, is not in sync with the ontologies he's putting forward. I hope it should be clear why this is not actually a contradiction, because so long as we're interacting with in the world, obviously we don't go and talk about Bhagavan's teachings to those who are not interested. But when people come and ask us questions about Bhagavan's teachings, we share what we understand. We share what we have learned from Bhagavan's teaching with them. So it's not a matter of trying to convince anyone. It's a matter of if people ask questions and try to understand Bhagavan's teachings, if they want to understand Bhagavan's teachings in a proper perspective, then we need to explain why Bhagavan taught Ekajivavada and how this Ekajivavada should be applied. The only correct application of Ekajivavada is to turn our attention within. So long as we're looking outwards, there seems to be a multiplicity of jivas. So if other people come and ask us and want to understand why Bhagavan taught that there's only one jiva, we have to explain it accordingly. So though it may seem that explaining these things is not in sync with the ontology we're explaining, it's actually no contradiction, because ultimately the one who needs to be convinced, we need to convince ourselves. When we discuss these things with others, what we are saying is not only for the benefit of others, it's also for the benefit of ourselves. We're trying to remind ourselves what Bhagavan has taught us, and the aim of what Bhagavan has taught us, which is to turn within. So if we understand Ekajivavada correctly, we will understand the correct application of Ekajivavada is not to look outwards and ask, well, what about this person? Are they not sentient? Is this person not sentient? Is that? No. Yes, they all seem to be sentient. But to whom do they seem to be sentient? To me. Who am I? We need to turn our attention back within. Because all the multiplicity of jivas appears only in the view of one. In fact, we can make sense of advaita only if we accept Ekajivavada, because if all multiplicity is an appearance, that must include the multiplicity of jivas. And that in order for there to be appearance, there must be one to whom it appears. And who is that one? I am that one. So who am I? We need to turn our attention back to ourselves. Sometimes people ask me, well, I'm sentient. Then are you saying that you're not sentient? Of course, so long as you see I and you, oneself and others, yes, there seems to be sentience, but we need to, it's for turning within, but we need to apply this teaching, not by trying to apply it outwardly in action. So outwardly, yes, we have to accept there's the appearance of multiplicity, and that appearance of multiplicity includes the appearance of a multiplicity of jivas, and we have to behave accordingly. Another person who commented wrote, this is nonsense. Either there are other minds, call it the one mind compartmentalized, who perceive this body when this body perceives them, or there are not. Yes, logically, there either are other minds or there are not. So long as we're looking outwards, we need to behave as if there are other minds. When we want to turn within and find out the reality of all this appearance of multiplicity, then we need to accept that there's only one jiva and there's only one to whom all this multiplicity appears. So who am I? The one to whom all this multiplicity appears. So though it may seem to be a contradiction, if we understand clearly and correctly, not only what Bhagavan has taught us, but how he expects us to apply what he has taught us, we will see that there's no contradiction. When we're looking outwards, there are in effect a multiplicity of jivas, but this multiplicity of jivas appears to whom? To me. Who am I? We need to turn our attention back towards ourselves to investigate who we are. And then the person goes on to say, in a dream where no entities actually see the dream body, that is the apparent instrument through which awareness sees them. They behave as if they do, but they do not. If waking and dream be the same, then all apparent others are like characters on a TV, the one watching the screen being the only body perceiving anything. How can there be any middle ground if Ekajiva is true? Well, so long as we are dreaming, there seem to be a multiplicity of jivas. So in the dream, we behave as if there are other jivas. It's only when we wake up from the dream, but we recognize, oh, it was all a dream. All the other people I saw in my dream were just my own mental fabrication. Not only all the other people in the dream, the person I mistook myself to be in a dream was as much a part of mental fabrication, as much part of the dream as all the other people in the dream. The dreamer is not the person we take ourselves to be in the dream. The dreamer is we who take ourselves to be a person in the dream. So we always need to distinguish ego or jiva from the person ego or jiva mistakes itself to be. The person we mistake ourselves to be is a part of the dream. We who mistake ourselves to be that person are the dreamer. That distinction is very, very important if we are to go within and investigate what we actually are. And then the same comment continues. If it's a concept that to be used as practice, then fine. But there's a high risk of insanity that comes along with it. That is, if we understand correctly, Bhagavan's teachings are deep and subtle. If we need to think about them carefully and understand how to apply them correctly. So there's no risk of insanity if we understand them correctly. Only only a person who is already insane would understand it in any other way. So we cannot blame the teaching for causing insanity. Insanity may cause us to misunderstand the teaching, but the teaching doesn't cause the insanity. And then the person goes on to say, if ultimately true, then Ramana is no different to the guy of a burger joint in my dream last night. Only he is telling me I'm dreaming, while the burger joint guy is not. But this sentence begins, if ultimately true. No, Ekajiva Vada is not ultimately true. What is ultimately true is only Ajata. According to Ajata, there's no jiva at all. Ekajiva Vada is taught to us in order to help us to find our way out of this appearance of Vivaharika Satya and to return to what is ultimately true, which is one only without a second. So Ekajiva Vada it is not just a philosophical concept, it is a practical teaching in order to help us to turn within to investigate what we actually are. And regarding the comment, then Ramana is no different from the guy at the burger joint in my dream last night. In a sense, that is true. But as this person goes on to say, only he is telling me I'm dreaming, while the burger joint guy is not. This is the difference between Guru and others. Guru comes, that though Guru is a part of our dream, Guru is a part of our dream. The form in which Guru appears is a part of our dream. Bhagavan used an analogy to illustrate this. There is a belief, but elephants are not afraid of anything except lions. And they are so terrified of lions that if an elephant dreams of a lion, the shock of seeing a lion in its dream will cause it to wake up. The lion that it sees in its dream is unreal, but the waking up is real. Likewise, the name and form of Guru is unreal, but though it's unreal, it brings about the real awakening. That is, Guru, though Guru appears in name and form, Guru is not that name and form. Guru is our own reality. Guru is what is shining in our heart as I am, our own existence. Guru appears outwardly in name and form in order to tell us the term within. Another analogy Bhagavan used in this context is a tame deer being used as a decoy to capture a wild deer. So because we mistake ourselves to be a body, Guru appears as a body just like us in order to tell us the term within. So the name and form of Bhagavan is as unreal as all other names and forms. But what is shining through that name and form is the Guru. And what he is telling us is the truth. He's pointing our attention back at ourselves. If we turn our attention back at ourselves, then we will wake up. So though in terms of names and forms, Bhagavan is as much a name and form as the burger guy joint who appeared in a dream. But the difference is he points us, he shows us the way to get out of this dream, to get out of this state in which all this multiplicity appears to be real. And then another comment that someone wrote in this connection, a similar type of comment: no teacher of Ramana's teachings ever give a straight answer to this question. I've asked all, no response, just jibber jabber. Here's the question once again. Being that the one writing this, ego jiva, perceives the world, how can eka jiva be true and the one writing this not be the only jiva, the only one that is having an apparent experience? That is, the one who is writing is not the jiva. But the jiva is the one who is aware of itself. I am this person who is, that is, what is, the one who is writing is a person. Jiva is that which mistakes itself to be the person who is writing and who is perceiving a world. And yes, that jiva is the only jiva there is. In the experience, none of us experience more than one experiencer. It seems to us that all the other people we see in a dream are experiencing this dream just like we are. But actually, we only ever experience one experiencer, and that is ourself. So the one experiencer, the one who experiences all this, is the one jiva. But in the view of this one jiva, there are a multiplicity of other jivas. So long as we're looking outwards, we need to behave as if there are a multiplicity of other jivas, though all those other jivas appear only in the view of this one jiva, the experience, the one in whose view they all seem to exist. And then this person goes on to say, eka jiva would mean that Michael James is a character in my dream, devoid of any real internal content, not actually living a life somewhere. That is, so long as you are dreaming, Michael James and every other person in this dream seems to be sentient, just like you. That is how it appears to us. But dismissing other people as just a character in our dream is missing the point. The point is, if all this is a dream, then who is the one who is dreaming all this? I am. So who am I? We need to turn our attention back at ourselves. So long as we're dreaming, so long as we're looking outward, there seems to be a multiplicity. What our aim should be to turn within and see who am I the one to whom all this multiplicity appears. This is the correct application of Ekajiva Vada. Otherwise, we are just reducing it to a philosophical concept to argue about who is the one jiva and everything. That is, we're totally missing the point. Then this person goes on, if there's one dreamer, only that dreamer experiences anything at all. Yes, that is true. From at the pratibhasika level, but at the vivaharika level, so long as we seem to be in a transactional world, there seem to be a multiplicity, and we need to behave in the transactional world accordingly. Even though the deeper truth is, all this is a dream, I am a dreamer of it. I means the one who is experiencing all this. I doesn't refer to Michael, it refers to the one who is experiencing all this. If Jiva is correct, how can it be otherwise? Yes, correct. If not absolutely true, it's simple deception. No, as I said, it is not absolutely true. Ekajivavada is never intended to be absolutely true. It is Ekajivavada is an, we can say, an intermediate truth. It is a useful thing to understand in order to encourage us to turn within, to investigate, who am I, the one to whom all this multiplicity of jivas appear. If we investigate ourselves keenly enough, then we will merge back in our source, and then only we will experience the absolute truth, which is, but there never has been any jiva at all, or there's never been a jiva or a body or a mind or a world or anything whatsoever. That is the absolute truth. Ekajivavada is an intermediate truth in order to help us to turn back within, to investigate what we are, in order to find out what is the ultimate truth, in order to experience that ultimate truth for ourselves. And who will experience that ultimate truth? It is not the one jiva. The ultimate truth will shine only when this one jiva loses itself in its own reality, that which is one without a second, the pure awareness I am. No matter how you dress it up, it is solipsism. Yes, it is, what Bhagavan teaches us is solipsism, but it's a very much deeper and more nuanced solipsism. It is not social solipsism. What Bhagavan teaches us is metaphysical solipsism. As I hope I've made clear in what I've been explaining so far, metaphysical solipsism, Ekajivavada, does not imply social solipsism. From a social point of view, yes, there are a multiplicity of jivas and we have to behave accordingly. But if we want to know the reality underlying this appearance of multiplicity, we need to know the reality of the one in whose view this multiplicity appears. So we need to investigate ourselves. That is the purpose of Ekajivavada. So these are comments that I was asked to reply to. There's one other thing I was asked to reply to, which is indirectly, one other comment I was asked to reply to, which is not directly related to this, but it is indirectly related. That is, there was a video made some time ago where he sadly passed away now. There was a person called Callistos Ware. Was Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox metropolitan. And he was an Oxford theologian, Oxford or Cambridge, I think Oxford, but he passed away recently. But anyway, in that video, there was some discussion about Christianity and Advaita. And someone wrote a comment on this recently. I get that there is some overlap between Christianity and Advaita. The Bible explicitly says I am is a name for God. But I also think they are distinctly different. Advaita doesn't believe in eternal individual souls, whereas Christianity does, in union with God. Am I right in stating this? Yes. That is, though Christianity talks about individual, eternal souls, it also says souls are created. Whatever is created is not eternal, because eternal doesn't mean everlasting. Eternal means what is beyond time. So the eternal souls that Christianity talks about, it is the idea that souls are being created by God and will exist forever. Forever implies time. But what is truly eternal is beyond time. Advaita doesn't believe, Advaita does not teach that there's an eternal individual soul. Advaita teaches that there's one jiva in whose view all these things appear, but that one jiva is not real. That one jiva is ego. And ego, we can see even from our experience, ego is not eternal. Ego appears in waking a dream, it disappears in sleep. So how can that which ceases to exist in sleep and seems to exist only in waking and dream be eternal? Obviously, it's not eternal. It's a mere appearance. But in order to know for ourselves that ego, which is what we now seem to be, is just an appearance, we need to investigate ourselves. We need to investigate who am I. If we investigate ourselves keenly enough, then we will see the eternal reality that underlies the appearance of this ego. That is, ego, as Bhagavan made clear, ego or soul, it's jiva, is that which is aware of itself as I am this body. Whereas the reality of this jiva is the pure awareness I am. So I am without adjuncts, without being conflated with anything other than itself, is the reality. The same I am, seemingly mixed and conflated with adjuncts, is what is called the ego or soul. But even when it's seemingly mixed, it is actually never mixed. It is ever pure. That is, the pure I am remains ever pure. It's only in the view of ourself as ego that I am seems to be mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So from the perspective of Brahman, the perspective of Atmaswarupa, ourself as we actually are, we are never aware of ourselves as I am this body. It's only in the view of ego that we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. So yes, this is a fundamental difference between Christian theology and Advaita. But this is a difference also between Advaita and most other systems of Vedanta. That is, Vedanta has been interpreted in many different ways by many different schools of thought. Most of the other schools of thought take jiva to be eternal, or if not most of them, many of them take it, the jiva to be eternal, and the highest state for the jiva is to be eternally in service of God. That is the goal of most systems of Vedanta, and also other systems of thought like Shaiva Siddhanta and so many others. It's only in Advaita, but it is taught, but the jiva is not actually real. Jiva is nothing other than Brahman in reality. Jiva Brahmaikya, the oneness of jiva and Brahman. When it is said jiva and Brahman are one, tattvamasi, you are that, it doesn't mean that jiva as jiva is Brahman. Jiva bereft of its adjuncts is Brahman. Brahman seemingly mixed and conflated with adjuncts is jiva. So as Bhagavan says very clearly in verse 24 of Upadesha Undiyar, Irkum ekayal isa jiva gal oru porle arba. By existing nature, God and soul are just one substance. When he says one substance, he means in their existence, in their existing nature. What he refers to as existing nature is what he indicated in the previous verse, the oneness of existence and awareness. That is what we actually are, is Satchit, pure existence awareness. That is the one substance. And in that existing nature, we and God are one. What makes us seem to be different, as he says, is upadi unave veru. Only adjunct awareness is different. That is, what makes us seem to be different from God is that we have identified ourselves with a set of adjuncts as I am this body, I am this person. That's what separates us. But in our actual existence as I am, we and God are one. So the reality of the soul is eternal. The reality of the soul is God. The reality of the soul is that pure I am. But as an individual, as a separate being, that what makes us seem separate from God is only our rising as ego and consequently identifying ourselves with a set of adjuncts, namely this person we now take ourselves to be. Sorry, that was quite a long explanation, but I hope that was a useful explanation to try to put this in proportion. Oh, there's one other thing, actually. I remember one other thing that I wanted to say in this connection. I'll just say it. Just so that we understand the importance of seeing these things in a balanced way. In the first line of verse 5 of Arunachal Ashtakam, Bhagavan says, Mani Galil Saradena We Doru Nana Matun Doru Oruvanam Maruvine Nidan. What that means is, like the thread in a string of gems, you alone shine as the one meaning the one real substance, one reality, in each soul and in each of the many mattas. Mattas means religions or spiritual philosophies or systems of belief. So here Bhagavan talks about, when he talks of Veer Dorum, Dorum is Doru is a it's a suffix that implies each and every. So in each and every soul, he is the one reality shining. That is, he's the. So here Bhagavan is talking as if there's a multiplicity of souls. And likewise in verse 3 of Amma Vidyai, Bhagavan says, he begins by saying, without knowing oneself, if one knows whatever else, so what? If one has known oneself, then what exists to know? And then he goes on to say, when one knows in oneself that self, which is the light without separation in separate sentient beings, that is, he talks of Bina Virgal. The Bina Virgal means the separate souls, the separate sentient beings, the separate jivas, the light that is devoid of separation, shining in all those separate souls, when one knows that self in oneself, so we ourselves are the one light but shines without separation in all the different sentient beings. So when we look outwards, we see a multiplicity of jivas just like us. But the reality in all those jivas, that which is shiny as I in all those jivas, that is what is shiny in ourself as I. And when we know that one, but shiny in ourself as I, he goes on to say, within oneself, the shining of oneself will shine forth. In other words, when we turn our attention away from this appearance of multiplicity to look back within, to see the one that is shining within us as I, which is the same one that is seemingly shining on all others as I, then when we know that I as it is, it will shine forth like a flash of lightning, and we as a jiva will be consumed by that, and that alone will remain. And he says, Arul Vilasame, this is the shiny of grace. Aha Vinasame, the annihilation of ego. Imba Vikasame, the blossoming of happiness. So our aim is not to maintain that there's only one jiva. So long as we're looking outward, there seems to be a multiplicity of jivas. If we turn within to investigate the reality of the jiva in whose view all those other jivas, this jiva in whose view all those other jivas appear, then we will be swallowed in the light of pure awareness that is ever shining in our heart as our own existence. That same light is what we see shining in all others. So Bhagavan, though Bhagavan teaches Ekajiva Vada, he teaches it in a very refined and nuanced way. It is not for application in action. That is it. Bhagavan never implied social solipsism. So long as we are interacting with this world, we're in the level of transactional reality. So all the other jivas are just as real as the jiva we seem to be. If we want to know the reality of all these multiple jivas, we first need to know the reality of this one jiva in whose view all those other jivas appear. If we turn our attention within to know the reality of this one jiva will be swallowed, and the entire appearance but exists only in the view of this one jiva, will be swallowed along with it, and then the one only without a second alone will remain as it always is. So when we understand Bhagavan's teachings, we need to be ready to have a very subtle and nuanced understanding. Then only we can understand him correctly. Sorry, that was a very long explanation, but I hope it's useful. And my voice seems to have held out, so I should be fit to answer questions. If anyone has any questions to ask.
There is one question. It's a bit long, so I'll read it out carefully. I'm very confused about karma, yoga, and liberation. Karma yoga, that is to fulfill duties, take majority of time and energy away from Atma Vichara. Plus, if as per the Advaita of Shankaracharya, karmana amritat asha na asti, then karma yoga seems like a futile effort, and maybe even delaying realization, that is liberation. In prarabdha, by design causing this, which ultimately means even liberation will be determined by karma. It seems like a catch-22, since self-realization is the only means to drop from the karma cycle. Instead, should we not dedicate our life only to Atma Vichara to achieve self-realization? But again, the sin of omission might not let it happen. Catch-22 again.
Okay,
Michael, is this clear? Or should I just ask him?
I think I understand the question. Actually, someone sent me this question as an email a day or two ago, but I haven't had time to reply to it. But this is a good opportunity to reply to it. That is, firstly, karma yoga is not doing one's duty. Karma yoga has a much deeper meaning, and Bhagavan has made it clear. But karma yoga is not a path separate from bhakti. If we read Upadesha Undiyar carefully, this is very clear. That is, in Upadesha Undiyar, in verse 2, Bhagavan says, but the cause for our falling in the great ocean of action is the vasanas. Vasanas means our inclinations, because we are inclined to seek pleasure in vishayas, in objects, in phenomena. We act accordingly. And so under the actions we do under the sway of our vasanas are what are called agamya, and those gamya bear fruit, and the fruit we experience is impermanent, but though the fruit ceases when we experience it, the inclination to go on doing the same action continues. So karma does not give liberation, is Bhagavan's conclusion in verse 2. Then in verse 3, he says, action done for God, that is nishkarmiya karma, done for God. Nishkarmiya karma means action but is not done for the fulfillment of desires, but is done just for God. That implies for the love of God, will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. So karma yoga, it's only if the actions are done without desire. But any action has to have a motive. We don't act with no motive. So if we are to act without desire, we need to act for the love of God. So the actions we do for the love of God without expecting any reward, therefore, reward for doing those actions, that is karma yoga. And then Bhagavan goes on to describe what are the different types of karma we can do. We can do actions there are 3 instruments of action: body, speech, and mind. So in the 4th verse, he says, this is certain. Puja, japa, and dhyana are actions of body, speech, and mind, respectively. And in this order, each is superior to the previous one. So his implication is the actions we do for the love of God by body are puja. The actions that we do for the love of God by speech are japa. And the actions we do for the love of God by mind are dhyana, or meditation. But the key thing is doing it for the love of God. In the Tamil version of verse 3, he simply says, Kartanu karkum nishkarmiya karma. That means nishkarmiya karma done for God. The implication is done for the love of God. And in the Malayalam version, he says, Ishwara priti and I. That means he says it explicitly for the love of God. So the karma yoga is karma yoga only if we're acting for the love of God, not for what we can get from it. So people say, oh, I'm doing my duty, I'm serving my family, I'm earning for my family, therefore this is karma yoga. If you're doing it just to satisfy your family or just to satisfy yourself, that is not karma yoga. If you're doing it only for the love of God, then only is it true karma yoga. And whatever actions we do by the body, as Bhagavan says in the 5th verse, that is any action done with the attitude, but all the 8 forms. The 8 forms refers to the 5 elements, sun, moon, fire, and jiva. So in other words, the whole of creation, if we consider all these 8 forms to be forms of God and worship and do worship accordingly, that is good worship of God. So that means anything we do in this world, if we are doing it for the love of God and not for anything benefit we can get from it, not because others will appreciate, oh, you're doing very good work, or not because we're pleasing our family or anything like that. We're doing it just for the love of God. That is nishkarmiya karma. That will purify the mind. But more efficacious in purifying the mind than the actions done by body are the actions done by speech. And more efficacious than the actions done by speech are the actions done by mind. So Bhagavan shows how the early stages of the path of bhakti, where we are doing puja, japa, and dhyana for the love of God, this is the karma yoga. But bhakti doesn't stop with just doing actions, because as he says in verse 8, rather than meditating on God as something other than ourselves, he doesn't say it in so many words, he says rather than anya bhava. Anya means what is other, bhava in this context means meditation. Rather than anya bhava, ananya bhava, in which he is I, is best among all. Ananya means what is not other. So the implication of this verse is, rather than meditating on God as if he's something other than oneself, meditating on him as not other than oneself, with the understanding that he is I. In other words, meditating on nothing other than I is best among all. So long as we're meditating on God as something other than ourselves, that is an action, because our attention is going away from ourselves towards something else. So that is a mental activity. But meditating on nothing other than ourselves, with the understanding that we are self for God, but God is that which is shining in our heart as I, that is not an action, because the attention paid to anything else is an action. Whereas when attention is directed back towards ourselves, the doer of that action will subside. So self-attentiveness is not an action, it is a cessation of action, a subsidence of action. Not only a subsidence of action, a subsidence of the doer of action, Vakarta. So in the next verse, verse 9, he says, by the strength of meditation, being in Sat-bhava, which transcends bhavana, is parabhakti tattva. What he means by that is, when he says by the strength of meditation, the meditation he's referring to is the meditation he extolled in the previous verse, namely ananya bhava, meditation on nothing other than oneself. In other words, it's another name for atma-vichara, or self-attentiveness, attending only to self. By the strength of that self-attentiveness, being in Sat-bhava. Sat-bhava means our real, in the state of being, which transcends bhavana, Here, bhavana means meditation in the sense of mental activity. So being in that state of being, but transcends all mental activity, that is parabhakti tattva. So the path of bhakti and karma yoga are one and the same up to the point where we are still meditating on God as something other than ourselves. But when we when we come to understand that God is not something other than ourselves, but that which is shining in our heart as I, and accordingly turn our attention within, that is when the action comes to an end, and we subside in the state of being, the sat bhava, and being in that state of being, which transcends all mental activity, by the strength of self-attentiveness, that is supreme, that is parabhakti tattva, supreme devotion. So there's, according to Bhagavan, bhakti is not a separate path. I'm sorry, karma is not a separate path. It is the preliminary stages of the path of bhakti. Before bhakti matures into vichara. When bhakti matures into vichara, then the action comes to an end and the doer of the action subsides in the state of being. And then he concludes that first series of 10 verses by saying, subsiding in this place from which we rose, and being thus, it's a bit difficult to translate into English because in Tamil, subsiding in the state of being is, but subsiding is a adverbial participle, whereas the being is a verbal noun. So the actual subject is being in the state in the place from which we rose, in place of having subsided there. That is karma and bhakti, that is yoga and jnana. So ultimately, the culmination of all four paths, the path of karma, the path of bhakti, the path of yoga, and the path of jnana, they all culminate in this state of just being in the place from which we rose. In other words, being in our own state of being, the state of pure I am. So this is the first thing to understand, but this popular notion there is nowadays that karma is doing one's duty, this is a very, very crude and incorrect understanding of karma yoga. But that is, karma yoga has to be nishkarmiya. It has to be done without desire. Why would we do any action without desire, without some motive? There has to be a motive. So other than desire, the only other motive can be love of God. So we need to act for the love of God. Yes, you can make doing your duty an act of love of God. Okay, God, you've given me this family, you've given me these responsibilities, let me do this work for the love of you. However, it's important to understand that whatever actions we do by mind, speech, and body cannot prevent us attending to ourselves, because we don't cease to exist when we act. In order to act, we must exist. So the awareness I am is implied in every action. I am working, I am doing this physical work, I'm doing this vocal work, I'm doing this mental work. Whether we are acting by body, speech, or mind, I am. So that I am is the underlying reality of all these actions we do. So if we have love to subside back within, we can hold on to I am, even in the midst of whatever actions we're doing. So that should be our aim. So it's not a matter of either I do my duty or I do atma vichara. Whatever actions this body was brought into existence to do, it will be made to do in accordance with prarabdha. That is, in order to, what we are destined to experience is determined by prarabdha. So we cannot experience anything that we are not destined to experience, and we cannot avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience. But in order to experience what we're destined to experience, we will be made to act in certain ways, because our own actions are part of, are necessary for many things to be experienced. So those actions that are necessary in order for us to experience whatever we are destined to experience will be made to do those actions. So action is not an obstacle to self-investigation, because self-investigation, we are not concerned with doing, we're concerned with being. There could not be any doing without being. We must exist in order to do something. So let us hold on to our being, to our existence, I am, and let the actions of body and mind go on in accordance with destiny. We're not concerned about that. Our concern should be holding on to I am. That is the highest form of, as Bhagavan said, that is to the extent to which we hold on to I am, we thereby, by the strength of that meditation on I am, we subside into the state of the pure I am, the state of being, Sat Bhava, and being in that state, that is Parabhakti Tattva. So the doer of action, the instruments of action are mind, speech, and body. So long as we are facing outwards, we identify ourselves with this mind, speech, and body. I am thinking, I am talking, I am doing. That sense of doership is there. But when we turn our attention back within and hold on to I am, we are separating ourselves from these instruments of action. So to the extent to which we separate ourselves from the instruments of action by holding on to our being, the doership will subside and we will remain in the state of being. So there's absolutely no contradiction at all between whatever actions we may do in accordance with our prarabdha and holding on to self-attentiveness, which is atma-vichara. So I hope this is an adequate answer to that question. If the person who asked the question wants to ask anything more, please feel free to do so. If anything I've said is not clear.
I think it was quite clear, Michael. The next question is, why is non-duality not monism? You have said all is one is not the same as one only without a second. Thank you, kindly.
Non-duality is a form of monism, but not all monism is non-duality. Because non-duality says, that is the pure non-duality, advaita Vedanta, the basic contention is there is one only without a second. Whereas there are many different systems of monism. Monism simply means all is one. But in Advaita, there's no all, there is only one. That is the difference. So Advaita is certainly a form of monism, but it's the most radical form of monism. It's a complete denial of multiplicity. It says all or multiplicity is just an appearance. So there are different forms of monism. One form of monism is what is called materialism or physicalism. That is, many people nowadays believe everything can be ultimately be explained in terms of physics. So all things are physical. So that's a type of monism. Everything reduces down to physical things. You may be able to reduce it down to energy or whatever it is. I don't know. There's so many different theories within physics. And they'll never reach any conclusion, because the more you research outwardly, the more you discover you don't know, and you go on and on multiplying your knowledge, but getting nowhere. If we want to get to the end of knowledge, Vedanta means end of knowledge, we need to turn back within and subside back within. That is the end of knowledge. We allow the mind to go outwards, knowledge is ever unending. So materialism is one form of monism. Idealism is another form of monism. Everything is mental. That's the basic contention of of idealism. And there are various other types of monism. There's neutral monism that says there's one reality behind the physical and the mental, and but both. So there's so many different ways. But most forms of monism claim that but all is one. in one way or other, they claim that. Whereas Advaita says there is no all, there is only one. So Advaita is the ultimate monism, the most radical form of monism. I hope that adequately answered that question. And another thing about Advaita, there are many schools, there are many systems of philosophy in India that claim to be non-dualistic. For example, Kashmir Shaivism claims to be a non-dualistic school of philosophy. And in fact, they claim to be more non-dualistic than Advaita Vedanta. But actually, they're not non-dualistic because they accept the reality of the appearance. So long as you accept the reality of more than one thing, it's not non-duality. So though they take it to be non-duality, it is not non-duality in the same sense that Advaita is non-duality. Because the definition of non-duality in Advaita is ekam eva advaityam, one only without a second. So so long if you give reality to anything other than the one, and what is that one? Tattvamasi, you are that. So if you give reality to anything other than your own being, your own fundamental awareness, I am, then it is not non-duality, or not non-duality in a pure sense.
Just a quick question, Michael. I mean, in some of the earliest verses in the Veda and all that, it says ekam, that there is only one. And they don't really try to define it in the Nasadea and so on.
Yeah.
Because it cannot be said of that it's existence or that it's not existence, and
Yeah.
not really say anything about it. And they don't call it the self or anything of the sort. In fact, self is something which is created in that sense, the sort of the cognitive aspects, creation, the body and so on. So by one, we're just meaning here, the only thing which one means, say with a capital O, is it's the I amness or the self, and that's all there is.
Yes.
And yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, Kashmir Shaivism, I remember hearing Swami Lakshmanji once, and just said, that all is Shiva, everything is just Shiva. And, because they call that one or whatever, is the name. I mean, you can give any name, everything is Shiva and all that. So it's a different approach. I'm not even 100% sure how one distinguishes between the two. But yeah, because I find that words are always problematic in talking about these things. So whenever people say monism, there is a tendency for it to become something substantial, to think of it as something substantial. When one says one, there's a tendency for it, one says multiplicity and then one, automatically the way that language works and minds work is that it becomes like something in some way, like a one, even though it's one without a second. Yeah, it's very problematic because I was looking at this thing of ekam and one. I said, look, I mean, what do they really mean? I mean, what is this one? It's undivided. In all the forms, it's never changing. It's still one, no matter how it appears to be. Can you talk a little bit about this thing of ekam and what one means in that sense, in terms of
In verse 28 of Upadeshundya, Bhagavan says, if one knows what the nature of oneself is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. The implication is, well, we can take it in two ways. When he says, then Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda, it can mean Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda is alone what will exist. Or if one knows the nature of oneself, then one will know the nature of oneself is Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. It amounts to the same. This is the closest that we can come in words to saying what is that one. It is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means it is pure existence. Chit, pure awareness. Ananda, pure happiness. And these are not three different things. These are three descriptions of the one thing. And this one thing that is described as Sat, Chit, Ananda, it is Anadi. It is without beginning. It is Ananta, without end, without limit. It is infinite, in other words. And it is Akhanda. It's unbroken, undivided, unfragmented. So it neither has any external limit, nor does it have any internal limit. Because if you divide something into many things, you're setting up so many internal limitations. It has no limitation of any kind whatsoever. It is one unbroken, infinite whole. This is the closest we can come in words. But he says here, if one knows what the nature of oneself is, so the onus is on us to know what our real nature is. And we can know what our real nature is only by investigating ourselves and thereby allowing ourselves to be swallowed by our own reality. But as you say, words have their limitations. No words can express this perfectly. That is why Bhagavan often said, the ultimate teaching is silence. Because the very nature of that one is silence, because there's nothing other than it. It's one without a second. Where is the scope for any noise, any sound? So its very nature is silence. But when Bhagavan talks about silence, when we talk about silence, people often think about vocal silence, keeping quiet, not talking. When I was in Ramanashram recently, I was sitting on the south-facing side of Mataputeshwara temple, on the raised platform there. That's also the prakaram around it. And there were various people there, and they were asking me various questions, and I was answering whatever questions I was being asked. And after some time, one person came up to me and asked, "Who are you?" So I just jokingly said, "Well, that's what I'm here to find out." He said, are you a spiritual teacher?" I said, "No." He said, "Then why are you talking so much? People come here to be silent." What can you say to such a person? But the reason I was talking was because people were asking me questions. I didn't go to Ramanashram to give lectures. I went there just to be with Bhagavan. But when people come and ask questions, naturally we have to answer. But many people who come to Ramanashram have a very superficial understanding of what Bhagavan's teaching is. Bhagavan did teach that the ultimate truth is silence, and that the ultimate truth can be conveyed only by silence. But the silence he's talking about is not just silence of keeping one's mouth shut. It's not even the mental silence. It is the silence, the eternal silence of pure being, the silence that is never disturbed by any amount of mental activity or vocal activity. That eternal silence. All that Bhagavan taught us in words is pointing us back within, because it is only by going back within that we can subside in that silence, which is our own real nature, which is itself the ultimate reality. So words obviously have their limitations. The reason Bhagavan gave us teachings in words is to point us in the right direction. So we need to follow those pointers by turning back within, and by turning back within, we will then subside into our source, which is itself the eternal silence of pure being. And only in that eternal silence, well, that eternal silence is the truth that reveals itself by just being itself.
The next question is, it says, to clarify my question, I can sense the feeling of I. I pay attention to the sense. But what next after that? Is there another step? I'm wondering if the feeling of I is a thought and therefore not the thinker. If so, am I doing self-attention incorrectly? Oh, and then he says, sorry, looks like my first question didn't come through, so it's being presented again. Can Michael please explain a little on what he means by attending to the self?
Right. This is the first we need to think carefully about the words we use. When we talk about the feeling of I, are we just a feeling? I is the pronoun that refers to ourself. Are we just a feeling? Obviously, we're something more than a feeling. We're something, we're our own existence, our own awareness is the one thing which is indubitable. So we are something much more than just a feeling. In order to understand what is meant by attending to ourselves, we first need to understand what we are. We need to have at least a basic understanding of what we are. And in order to understand what we are, we also need to understand what we are not. Now we seem to be a person consisting of body, mind, well, to put it in, according to a technical analysis, we are a form composed of 5 sheaths. We have a physical form of this body, a life that animates it, the mind that functions within it, the intellect, and the will. This is what we seem to be. So when we refer to ourselves, when we take ourselves to be a person, all these 5 are implied. But we are not actually any of these, because these are things that appear and disappear. This person that I seem to be, now I seem to be Michael. Michael appears in waking and dream. But even though he appears in both waking and dream, it's actually the body that is called Michael in the waking state is not the same body that is called Michael in dream state, because the Michael in dream may be injured, whereas Michael in waking may be healthy. So it's not even the same, but basically it's the same identification. I'm still taking myself to be the same person. But this person that I take myself to be disappears in sleep. But though this person disappears, I still exist in sleep because I'm very clearly aware I slept. I was in a state in which I wasn't aware of anything. I mean, I wasn't aware of anything. That means I wasn't aware of any phenomena. I wasn't aware of this body or mind that I now take myself to be. I wasn't aware of the objects of the world. I wasn't aware of thoughts, feelings, anything. I was just aware that the pure awareness I am. That alone is what is experienced or what shines in sleep. So this person we take ourselves to be is not what we actually are. We are that which remains in the absence of this person, that which shines in sleep. In other words, this fundamental awareness I am, that is what we actually are. So attending to ourselves means attending to this fundamental awareness I am. Obviously, this awareness I am is not an object. It's not even the subject. It is the reality underlying the subject. To make it easier for us, we are advised to turn our attention away from all objects back towards the subject, back towards one to whom all the objects appear. So, to whom do all these things appear? To me. So who is that me? So the me to whom all things appear is the subject. But when we investigate the subject, as the subject, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. But what is essential in the subject, the reality of the subject, is only that fundamental awareness I am. So we are moving our attention away from all the adjuncts, all that we take ourselves to be, this body and mind and thoughts and feelings and likes and dislikes and vasanas and so on. All these things are things known by us. They're objects known by us. So we have to move our attention away from these objects back towards ourselves, the knower of all these things. So this is as far as words can point. we each need to read Bhagavan's teachings very carefully and attentively. We need to think about it to make sense of it. And we need to understand for ourselves what he means by self-attentiveness. If it's not entirely clear, try your best to attend to, if you like to call it a feeling eye, okay, attend to a feeling eye, but it's something much more solid than any feeling. That is, the one thing that is so certain is I am. That is, we can be unsure about all other things. We can doubt all other things, but the one thing we can never doubt is our own existence. The one thing that is always existing and shining in our experience is I am. So we need to think carefully about this, to make sense of this, and try to attend to that which is shining within us as I. What is it? What is this awareness that is shining within us as I? The words can only go so far. Words can only point, but we have to think carefully about what Bhagavan has said. In the opening the opening section of Vichara Sangraham, he expresses it very beautifully. Let me see if I can find it. In section 1.1 of Vichara Sangraham, he says, how to investigate. If one asks, the reply is, does this body, which is jada, jada means non-aware, insentient, like a block of wood, come shining and behaving as I? It does not. Therefore, making the corpse body remain as a corpse, and being without uttering I, even by word or speech, whether physically or mentally, the implication, if one keenly investigates what is it that now shines as I, then in one's heart, a kind of spuripu, a fresh clarity, alone will appear itself to itself, or oneself to oneself, without sound as I am I. This is, if we pay close attention to these words, these are very nice pointers Bhagavan has given us. Making the corpse body remain as a corpse. That is, his body is just, it's something insentient. It's like a block of wood. So it's no, it's just a corpse, a living corpse, we can say. So making it remain as corpse, in other words, discarding it as one would discard a corpse, and being without uttering I, even by word. So not even mentally or physically saying the word I. If one keenly investigates, what is it that now shines as I? These are very, very beautiful words Bhagavan uses here. We need to keenly, what he says in Tamil is, Ipodu nanena vilanguvadu eduvendru pumeyai vicharital. That means, Ipodu means now. Nanena means as I. Vilanguvadu, what shines. So what is it that shines as I? What shines as I? Edu, what is it that shines as I? Kumei means very keenly, sharply investigate. So we need to look within very keenly to see what is it that is shining within us as I. Beyond this, words can't go. We each have to find the way ourselves. Sometimes when people persisted in asking Bhagavan, but Bhagavan, how to do it? Bhagavan would sometimes say, if the way were objective, it could be shown objectively, but this is not objective. Do you need to be shown the way inside your own home? You yourself have to find the way. So Bhagavan's words are pointing us in the right direction. We need to turn our attention to that, back towards, and keenly attend to that which is shining within us as I. That's as much as words can say. We each have to understand it for ourselves. This is why it is said, Sravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana are all necessary. Sravana literally means hearing, but in this context, it means paying close attention to what Bhagavan has said. not necessarily all that is recorded in talks and places like and books like that, because that's not the exact words of Bhagavan, but what he said in his own original writings. So we need to pay close attention to what he actually said. That is Sravana. We need to think about it carefully in order to make sense of it. That Bhagavan says, attend to yourself. Bhagavan says, always keeping the mind fixed on oneself alone is called Atma Vichara. So what's he mean by always keeping one's mind fixed on oneself? We need to think about it. We need to make sense of it, understand what he's saying. And most important, that's the manana. Most important of all, nididhyasana. We need to put it into practice. But we can't put it into practice unless we've understood it. That's why the Sravana and Manana are very necessary. And the more we put it into practice, the more we will get from our Sravana and Manana, because the more we actually practice what Bhagavan is teaching us, the more meaningful his words will become to us. And the more meaningful they become to us, the deeper our manana will become. And the deeper our manana becomes, the deeper our practice will become. So the words can point us only to a certain extent. We've got to find out for ourselves. This is why Bhagavan called it vichara. Vichara means investigation. So how to investigate? We have to investigate and find out for ourselves how to investigate. But we also need to follow the pointers given by Bhagavan. Otherwise, it's very easy to go in the wrong direction if we haven't understood Bhagavan correctly. That's why we often need to come back to Bhagavan's words again and again and verify our understanding and continue trying to make clearer and clearer sense of what he's saying and put it into practice more and more and more. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question. If it's not an adequate answer, even Bhagavan couldn't, I mean, I'm just pointing out what Bhagavan said. Even Bhagavan couldn't say more than this in words, because ultimately we have to understand. He's pointing us clearly in the right direction. We have to understand the direction in which he's pointing us. For that, we need to pay close attention to his words. We need to think about them carefully and try our best to put them into practice.
The next question is, how do you balance forgiveness and remaining connected with family members where there is feud and toxicity? At one level, I understand that forgiveness is absolutely necessary, but it is helpful to remain connected with a person when they are easily triggered because of their trauma, by our existence, and also when our capacity to love them unconditionally is hard. In this situation, what is the right thing to do other than surrender to Bhagavan to heal the rift?
Human relations are very, very complex. That is, even forgiveness, we need to go beyond forgiveness. Because if you feel someone has done a wrong to you, you can forgive them. But why should we even feel that anyone has done any wrong to us? So we need to go beyond the state where we feel there's any need for forgiveness. We need to go beyond the idea that anyone has done any wrong to us. If someone has seemingly done wrong to us, okay, we are experiencing the fruit of our past karmas, so let's not blame that person. And if someone does wrong to us, there may be so many reasons. They may have their own. If a person behaves in a obnoxious way or in a disagreeable manner, in any sort of disagreeable manner, it's because they have problems of their own. So often they may behave in a disagreeable manner towards us, but we are not the cause of their. We may be just. They may be just lashing out because of other experiences they've had in life. So we need to be understanding. We need to be sympathetic. We need to be tolerant. We need to, yes, forgiving if you want to say forgiving, but it's better just to say, that is, we shouldn't hold anything against anyone. That is, none of us are perfect. we've all made mistakes in life. Which of us can hold up our hands and say, I've never made any mistake? We've all made mistakes. We've all sometimes, whether intentionally or unintentionally, said things that hurt people. Even if we don't want to hurt people, sometimes we may say something very innocently, but it may be taken quite differently by that person and they may be hurt by it. So we need to be very tolerant of people. But there are some relationships don't work. However much we may try to patch up a relationship, sometimes it just doesn't work. So we need to accept things the way they are. We should always keep the door open to people. If people want to come back to us and want to apologize or want to make up for whatever misunderstanding there was in the past, we should always keep the doors open. We should never hold grudges against people. However much wrong they may seem to have done to us, we shouldn't hold grudges against them. We must be very tolerant, caring, and we must see ourselves in them. Whatever weaknesses are there in other people, those same weaknesses are there in us, maybe to a lesser extent. But we should see our own weaknesses in others, and then we will become far more tolerant of their weaknesses, of their failings. And we'll also become more tolerant of our own weaknesses and failings, because none of us are perfect. And if a relationship doesn't work out, it's almost invariably that it's just the two people just don't gel together. So it's very easy to point a finger at the other and say you are to blame, but we are as much to blame as them probably. So we just need to be very tolerant and caring and yes, ready to forgive if you feel forgiveness is necessary. But we should even go beyond the feeling that there's anything to forgive. People make mistakes. We all make mistakes. So that's just the nature of life. We try and get on with people as much as we can. Sometimes if a relationship doesn't work, we should just accept the way it is. Sometimes there may be, sometimes you may have a falling out with a person and we're ready to patch up if that person is ready to patch up. If they're not ready to patch up, we just need to accept the situation as it is. Human relationships are extremely complicated. There's so many factors involved and so many reasons why people behave in the way they behave. So we just need to keep an open heart and open mind and accept things the way they are and try to be kind to people, however unkind they may seem to have been to us. I mean, there's no perfect answer to these things. We just have to be kind and compassionate and caring and understanding and sympathetic and empathetic and whatever. Beyond this, what can we say? This isn't a guaranteed formula, but you'll be able to patch up all relationships. Some relationships, they're just not destined to be patched up. It's just the way it is.
Michael, there's just one thing, because all of us every human being comes across so many relationships and so many problems in relationships. And sometimes people can become very violent and harmful or abusive. Sometimes, there's love, caring, compassion.
Yeah.
And one of the things is, which I think perhaps many of us have struggled with, or at least some of us, that compassion and kindness are very, very important. I mean, that's the central thing. It's the most important thing is to love. But it has to come with a kind of clarity and boundaries, because sometimes if the clarity and discrimination are not there, a certain kind of compassion becomes a kind of sentimentality, and we end up doing more harm than good. It's like even with a child, with a child and a mother, sort of real love is doing what's also the right thing at that time for a child. Otherwise, you end up spoiling the child and actually doing harm. So I think this kind of discrimination is very important. the clarity of, and I think it's quite difficult that, at least I have found it quite difficult.
It is difficult because, yes, there are situations where we need to set boundaries, but particularly if we're following the spiritual path, our inclination is always to subsidence. So we tend to let people walk over us, but that often isn't good for the person we allow to walk over us. So, yeah, and none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. And as Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, God exists in all, but for that reason, you don't go and embrace the tiger. So there are certain people, they're just by nature toxic. And sometimes it's though we may feel empathy and compassion for them in our heart, it's necessary to keep a distance because it's, as you say, we need to sometimes set boundaries for the good of all concerned, not only for our good, but for the good of others also.
This is the classic case. If somebody is about to kill a whole bunch of people, then do you, I mean, there's always the classic case. It comes up also in the Buddhist things of the Bodhisattva, that you are there for the welfare of all beings, save all beings and so on. But if somebody is going to attack a whole bunch of people and kill them, what are you going to do? You know, you have to stop them somehow, you know, but selflessly. That is the main thing, without any hostility or ill will for their own good. Yeah, it's a tricky. The next question.
Another thing is, action is always imperfect. There's no such thing as a perfect action. Even Rama had to seemingly go against Dharma by shooting Bali from behind, which is seemingly an action a warrior shouldn't shoot another warrior from behind, but it was the only way for Dharma to be established. So yeah, life is very complicated, but often there's no perfect solution. We ultimately, we all muddle through life trying our best to do what is right, and no doubt failing many times.
The next question is, are thoughts caused by prarabdha, that is destiny?
There actions of mind, speech, and body are driven by two forces, by our own vasanas, and also by that our own vasanas means our own will, and by the will of God. That is, God makes us do certain actions, but are necessary in order. It's not prarabdha that is making us do, it is God. That is, Bhagavan is, if we pay close attention to what Bhagavan wrote in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother, he says, avarava prarabdha prakaram. That means in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, adakanavan. Adakanavan means he who is for that. That's referring to God or Guru, the ordainer of the fruit of action. Angangirandu, being there. That means being in each place, implying being in the heart of each one of us, artavipan, will cause to act. So he doesn't say it's the prarabdha that causes us to act. God makes us act in accordance with the prarabdha. So certain actions of mind, speech, and body are necessary in order for our prarabdha to unfold. So those actions of mind, speech, and body, but we need to do in order to experience our prarabdha, those actions will be made to do by God. That does not mean that all the actions we do by mind, speech, and body are actions we're made to do by God, because if that were the case, there'd be no such thing as agamya. Agamya means the actions we do in accordance with our own will, but bear fruit. If all our actions were actions we're made to do by God, then it's God who should experience the fruit of the actions, not us. So obviously, that is not what the law of karma means. So yes, some actions of mind, speech, and body, in other words, some thoughts, some words, some bodily actions are in accordance with prarabdha. That is the actions we need to do in order for the prarabdha to unfold. So those actions we're made to do. But many actions that we do in accordance, we are made to do in accordance with prarabdha, we are also simultaneously doing in accordance with our vasanas. That is a simple example I often give to explain this. If it's your destiny to be a doctor, in order to be a doctor, you have to study hard, you have to pass the exams, and so on and so forth. So those actions that are necessary in order to become a doctor, you will be made to do those actions. So you'll be made to study, to pass the exams, and so on and so forth. But most people who become doctors also want to become doctors for one reason or another. They may want to become doctors because they think being a doctor is a caring profession. They can take care of people. They can do good to people. They may think being a doctor is a prestigious job. You get social prestige by being a doctor. So that may be their reason. Or they may think they can earn a lot of money by being a doctor. That may be their reason. But whatever be the reason, most people who study hard and become doctors do so because they want to become doctors for one reason or another. So though they're being made to do those actions by God in accordance with their prarabdha, they're also being made to do those actions by their own vasanas. So just because an action is an action we're made to do by God doesn't necessarily absolve us from responsibility for that action, because that action may, in most cases, will also be driven by our own vasanas. But this question, the thing about the law of karma, Bhagavan has taught us the general principles. We need to understand the general principles, but we don't have to dwell on this too much. People ask, how do I know whether this action is in accordance with prarabdha or not? Well, time alone will tell whether it's in accordance with prarabdha, but that shouldn't concern us. What should concern us, that is why Bhagavan taught us the law of karma as he taught it, but whatever we may do, we cannot change what we are destined to experience. What we are destined to, as he said in the later sentences of that note to his mother, what is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstruction. This is certain. So whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Whatever is not going to happen is not going to happen. So we shouldn't concern ourselves with what is happening. We shouldn't concern ourselves with actions. We should concern ourselves with, who am I, the one who has risen feeling I am doing this action. I am experiencing this result of action. We need to investigate ourselves. That is the point. So if we understand, but whatever effort we make, we cannot change what is destined to be experienced. That will reduce the enthusiasm with which we normally jump outwards, trying to achieve this, to avoid that, and so on. So if we understand it's all happening, everything is happening according to prarabdha. We cannot experience anything we're not destined to experience. We cannot avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience. So the only wise use of our freedom is to turn our attention within to find out who am I, and thereby to surrender ourselves, surrender our mind, speech, and body entirely to Bhagavan.
The next one is it the same source which impels prarabdha karmas and the appearance of the first self-formation?
The source doesn't impel anything. The source is our own reality, I am, which is pure being. All impetus starts, that is the first impulse, the first rising is the rising of ourself as ego. Once we rise as ego, the very nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by identifying itself with the body, and then constantly seeking things other than itself. So karma is a consequence of our rising as ego. And karma begins with agamya, the actions we do under the sway of our vishaya vasanas. Those actions bear fruit. The fruit of those actions are what is selected by God for us to experience as prarabdha. So it all originates from our rising as ego. And the whole thing can be brought to an end by our putting an end to the rising of ego. We can put an end to the rising of ego only by turning within and knowing ourselves as we actually are. I hope that adequately answered that question. That is, the source of ego is our real nature, what we actually are, pure Satchit. And ego is in turn the source of everything else. But as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulunaptu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. That is, what ego sees as everything, it's seeing itself as all these things. So ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this is giving up everything. That is, if we investigate ego, ego will subside and dissolve back into its source. And in the absence of ego, everything else will cease to exist along with it, because everything else exists only in the view of ego. So the source of all things, the source of ego is Atma-swarupa, Brahman, our real nature, pure awareness, Satchit. The source of everything else is ego.
The last question is, did Bhagavan ever speak about the gunas in his writings or discourses?
Yes, he sometimes refers to gunas. For example, in Nana, he refers to, he says, of all the niyamas, of all the observances or restrictions, the best is Mita Sattvika Ahara Niyama. Mita Sattvika Ahara Niyama means, Mita means moderate, implies moderate quantities. Sattvika means what is conducive to sattva or beingness or purity or clarity. Ahara means what is taken in. It primarily means food, but it can also mean what's taken in through the five senses. But that's not generally the meaning given. It's usually ahara is taken to mean the food, but we can also extend its meaning to include what's taken in through the five senses. And niyama means the restriction. So the restriction of taking only moderate quantities of sattvic food, food that is conducive to sattva, will increase the sattva guna of the mind, and which will thereby help in atma vichara, because obviously the three gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva literally means beingness. That is the quality of calmness, clarity, and so on, purity, and so on. Rajas means activity, restlessness, and tamas means darkness, dullness, the clouding of the mind with desires, and so on. So, as he says in Vichara Sangram, he gives he says just like it is just like it is difficult to separate the fine threads of a silk cloth with a blunt iron bar, and just as it's difficult to find a subtle object, a very minute object, that is lying on the ground in the flickering light of a lamp, so also it's difficult to do this Atma Vichara in a mind that is clouded with tamas. That's compared to the blunt iron bar that you're trying to separate the fine threads of silk with, or a mind that is agitated by rajas. That's like the lamp flickering in the wind. So a sattvic state of mind is conducive to Atma Vichara. That doesn't mean that I can't do Atma Vichara because my mind isn't sattvic enough. We shouldn't come to that conclusion, because the best way to bring about a sattvic state of mind is to practice Atma Vichara, because in Atma Vichara, what are we attending to? We are attending to our own being, Sat. So the more we attend to our being, the more we hold on to our being, the more we thereby subside in our being, and that is the state of sattva. So the best way to bring about a sattvic state of mind is Atma-vichara. And a sattvic state of mind is in turn very conducive to Atma-vichara. But that even when our mind is not in such a sattvic state, when it's more, when it's in a duller state or in a more agitated state, we should still try to hold on to our being. I hope that adequately answers that question.
Thank you very much, Michael. And thank you very much with your cold and cough and so on for...
Thank Bhagavan, he kept my cough under control. Sometimes I'm still getting very bad cough, but they've, yeah, it seems to be a little better now. A few days ago, they found that one of the bacteria was not responding to the antibiotics, so they've changed the antibiotic. So that seems to be helping.
Glad. Well, I'm sure that we wish you all a very, that all of us
it will all, that this is the nature of the body. The sickness comes and the health comes. They alternate. It's just that this is the impermanent nature of the body. So nothing to worry about too much.
Yes.
It'll go on oscillating like this until one day the body itself will go away.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, right. Thank you. Namo Ramana.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.